Hello, welcome to another lesson in AP Comparative Government. Today we're going to be covering the topics of nations and society. The key question here is how do societal components like nationalism, ethnicity, and ideology shape political values? Our key objectives here are to understand the components of ethnic identity, to understand the ways that national identity binds people together, to distinguish citizenship and patriotism in their legal and emotional relationship to the state, to analyze the causes of ethnic and national conflict, to compare political ideologies and attitudes regarding political change and the goals of politics, and to define political culture and analyze its influence in society. Society is a broad term that refers to complex human organization, a collection of people bound by shared institutions that define how human relations should be conducted. From country to country and place to place, societies differ in how individuals define themselves and their relationships to one another, to government, and to the state. Culture is the content of the institutions that help define a society. Culture acts as a kind of social roadmap, providing norms and priorities that guide people as they organize their lives. Culture is a repository for the activities and ideas that the group considers proper and normal. Political culture, in turn, refers to a society's norms for political activity. The basic norms for a political activity in society are therefore going to be shaping the way that people interact within political parties and within political ideologies as well. The Engelhardt Values Map, let me move myself so you can see the name of this map, um, is basically a map that shows us how traditional versus secular rational values work in regards to the expression of values as well. So we have different types of groups that are going to be separated and categorized by their religious background and the way that they have um, express themselves versus their survival instincts. So the countries that are African Islamic are going to be pretty low in the self-expression scale, while they're also going to be pretty low on the traditional scale because they're both traditional and they're also going to be based on survival, not on individual rights, not on self-expression. On the top far right, however, we have Protestant Europe, and these are countries like Finland, the Netherlands, Norway, which have high levels of self expression and high levels of secular rational values. Again, we see the different groups that have been created through the religious ethic that shape those groups. Experiences in each society are unique, and they thus shape an individual's identity. When we use the term ethnic identity or ethnicity, we emphasize a person's relation to other members of society. Ethnic identity is a set of institutions that bind people together through a common culture. These institutions can include language, religion, geographic location, costumes, appearance, and history, among other things. As these distinct attributes are institutionalized, they provide members of a group with a shared identity. This process is called ascription, the assigning of a particular quality at birth. National identity is an institution that binds people together through common political aspirations. Among this, the most important are self government and sovereignty. The idea of a nation shapes this type of identity. A nation is defined as a group that desires self government, often through an independent state. National identity can create nationalism, a pride in one's people and the belief in their own sovereign political destiny that is separate from those of others. Most people build their identities based on their relationship with a state. Citizenship can be defined as an individual's or group's relation to the state. Those who are citizens swear allegiance to that state, and the state is, in return is obligated to provide rights to those individuals or the members of that group. Citizenship can also convey certain obligations, such as the duty to serve in the armed forces or pay taxes. Citizens might give rise to a sense of patriotism, or prides in one state. People are patriotic when they have pride in their political system and seek to defend and promote it. Because these identities might be polarizing, both ethnic or national conflict might arise. Ethnic conflict can be defined as conflict between ethnic groups that struggle to achieve certain political or economic goals at the expense of each other. Each group may hope to increase its power by gaining greater control over existing political institutions like the state or government. By contrast, groups involved in national conflict seek to gain or prevent the other from gaining sovereignty, clashing with one another over issues of autonomy, such as the quest to form an independent state. In both of these cases, violence is a common tool for using, bypassing, or destroying the coercive powers of the state. The sources of conflict are threefold. Societal explanations tend to emphasize such issues as ethnic heterogeneity, the number of ethnic groups, and their degree of integration or polarization. Economic explanations concentrate on the struggle for resources between groups, as well as the general level of poverty across a country as a whole. A political explanation emphasizes the state and regime, such as the relative capacity or autonomy of the state and the degree and form of democratic or non democratic regimes. Political identities like nationalism and ideology emerged alongside the modern secular state in many ways as an alternative or a rival to religion. Accordingly, political identities and religions are similar in many ways. Both make assertions about the fundamental nature of humans and society and about the keys to a good life and an ideal community. And both provide their adherents with core texts, prophets, and a promise of salvation. The Bible and the Constitution both offer guidelines for a good life. Fundamentalism as an ideology that seeks to unite religion with the state, or rather to make faith the sovereign authority, that is, to create a theocracy, seeks to restructure religion as a central political identity, to make faith the sole foundation for a modern regime, a concrete and inerrant guide for politics in the contemporary world. Moving on, we're going to be talking about the different political ideologies that permeate the political field and also political attitudes that appear within countries as well. Political ideology comprises the basic values an individual holds about the fundamental goals of politics regarding both freedom and equality. Political attitudes focus on the specific context of political change in a given country. By contrast, political ideologies are more universal, since they assume there is only one ideal way to balance freedom and equality. Political attitudes describe views regarding the necessary pace and scope of change in the balance between freedom and equality. The attitudes are typically broken up into the categories of radical, liberal, conservative, and reactionary, and are often arrayed on a spectrum going from left to right. A radical in one country may be conservative in another. Political attitudes describe views regarding the necessary pace and scope of change in the balance between freedom and equality. The attitudes are typically broken up into the categories of radical, liberal, conservative, and reactionary, and are often arrayed on a spectrum going from left to right. Radicals believe in dramatic, often revolutionary change of the existing political, social, and economic order. They believe that the current system is broken and cannot simply be improved or repaired, but must be scraped in favor of a new order. Liberals favor evolutionary change. In the liberal view, progressive change can happen through changes within the system. It does not require an overthrow. Conservatives question whether any significant or profound change in existing institutions is necessary. They want the status quo. Reactionaries seek to restore political, social, and economic institutions. They advocate restoring values, changing back to a previous regime or state that they believe was superior to the current order. In fact, radicals and reactionaries have much in common. Both believe in dramatic change, though in different directions, and both contemplate the use of violence to achieve this change. Consider these examples. In the United States, Canada, and Western Europe, radicals are viewed as those who seek to fundamentally transform or overthrow the current capitalistic democratic order. replacing it with a system of greater economic and social equality. Liberals in these countries are sympathetic to some of these ideas but believe in pursuing gradual changes within the current system, engaging with democratic institutions. Conservatives believe that the current economic and social structures are as good as they are likely to be and that change is unlikely to improve the state of humanity. Reactionaries, meanwhile, would likely reject the radical and liberal critique of the status quo and favor a restoration of greater inequality or hierarchy between people. A Chinese radical would be defined as someone who seeks the destruction of the current system, would advocate the overthrow and replacement of communist rule, perhaps by a democracy like the ones found on the West. Chinese liberals are also likely to support these changes, although they would favor a process of gradual change within the existing political system. Chinese conservatives are skeptical of institutional change. They resist calls for democratic reform. Chinese reactionaries strongly oppose any reforms that might jeopardize communist rule. Chinese neo-Maoists, as they are sometimes called, favor a return to earlier purer communist values and policies, rolling back changes and restoring their communist ideal. Political ideologies are defined as a set of political values held by individuals regarding the fundamental goals of politics. They are exemplified by five dominant ideologies: liberalism, communism, social democracy, fascism, and anarchism. They might be universalistic, but they're not as specific to one country or a specific time. Liberalism, as an ideology, places a high priority on individual political and economic freedom. Adherents of liberal ideology believe that politics should seek to create the maximum degree of liberty for all people, including free speech, the right of association, and other basic political rights. The current definition of democracy follows the concept of a liberal democracy, a system of political, social, and economic liberties supported by competition, participation, and contestation, such as voting. Liberals argue that despite this shortcoming, a high degree of freedom will produce the greatest amount of general prosperity for the majority. Communism differs greatly from liberalism in its view of freedom and equality. Whereas liberalism enshrines individual freedom over equality, communism rejects the idea that personal freedom will ensure prosperity for the majority. To eliminate exploitation, communism advocates that the state control all economic resources and thus produce true economic equality for the community as a whole. Social democracy, also sometimes referred as socialism, draws from ideas connected to both communism and liberalism to form its own distinct ideology. Social democracy accepts a strong role for private ownership and market forces while maintaining an emphasis on economic equality. A state with strong capacity and autonomy is considered important to social democrats to ensure greater economic equality through specific policies like job protection or social benefits like medical care, retirement, and higher education. They aim for a welfare state. Fascism is hostile to the idea of individual freedom and also rejects the notion of equality. Instead, fascism rests on the idea that people and groups can be classified in terms of inferiority and superiority, justifying a hierarchy among them. Fascism conceives of society as an organic whole, a single living body, and the state as a vital instrument to express national will. State autonomy and capacity must therefore be extremely high, and democracy, no matter how it is defined, is rejected as anathema, just as freedom and equality are rejected. I mean, it's just total control. Nazi Germany and Mussolini's Italy are clear examples of fascism. Anarchy departs from these other ideologies quite drastically. If liberalism, communism, and fascism differ over how powerful the state should be, anarchism rejects the notion of the state altogether. Anarchists share with communists the belief that private property leads to inequality, but they are opposed to the idea that the state can solve this problem. Anarchists view the state as a threat to freedom and equality rather than as a champion. But they believe that both individual freedom and equality can be achieved only by eliminating the state entirely. Without a state to enforce inequality or limit personal freedom, people would be able to cooperate freely as true equals. Here we have a simple chart of the 5 different types of ideologies. Again, anarchists are going to be wanting a high degree of equality and a high degree of freedom at the expense of the state. Communism has a low level of freedom but a high level of equality, again, when we have a lot of state control. Fascism also has a lot of state control. It has low level of equality and low level of freedom because we don't want people to overturn the state whatsoever. Liberalism has a high degree of freedom and a somehow low degree of equality because we have a lot of capitalist enterprises that increase the gap between the rich and the poor. And social democracy stands in the middle with a rather high degree of freedom and a rather high degree of equality as well. Again, thank you so much to Patrick O'Neill for his fantastic book. And we recognize all the authors of the media and all the images that we used in this presentation. Thank you for listening.